Hello and welcome to a Sunday immediate takeaway edition of Always College Football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy, and we appreciate you being here. A lot that we need to get to today. A bunch of different games that we had a chance to kind of consume yesterday. Our game was at 2:30. We did Ole Miss and Georgia, so it was 2:30 Central Time. So if it was in the 2:30 window and you're expecting a deep dive, probably not going to be able to provide that for you today, but did have a couple games on while in the booth, so have some general takeaways. Let's start with number one team in the country. That would be the Oregon Ducks. Kind of played with their food just a little bit. Didn't exactly click on all cylinders coming out of the gate. Their defense, I thought, did a decent job for the most part. But when you look at it, Oregon's going to be just fine. I'm not concerned about this game. They can kind of sleepwalk to the finish line. They're cruising en route to the Big Ten title. I don't think you have a whole lot that you need to be concerned about based on that performance, even though I would have liked to seen them rev their engines maybe a little bit more. Let's go next to Ohio State. This game got sideways, a little bit of a slow start, and then Ohio State settled in, but the defense for Ohio State continues to be the takeaway for me. That's now multiple weeks in a row where the defense has played off the charts good. We know that Purdue has had their challenges offensively, but there have been moments in which they've looked a little better this year, most notably a couple weeks ago against, I believe it was Illinois. I think they scored 49 in that one. So this is a Purdue group that at times has found a little hitch in their giddy up offensively, and really Ohio State had nothing doing for it. Very efficient performance, created a couple big runs, also did a great job, I think, in the passing game. Very, very solid from Will Howard and this passing attack, and Jeremiah Smith continues to just be incredible as a true freshman, every bit as advertised. We'll go next to team number 3. That would be the Georgia Bulldogs, who fell at the hands of Ole Miss. Was on the call for this one, like I referenced. This was a really interesting game because if you were to ask me after the first series how things were going to go for Ole Miss, I would have told you, yeah, things are going to be really tough. A couple things happened in that first series. Jackson Dart gets hurt, hurts his left ankle, goes down. Next thing you know, he throws an interception. Georgia goes right down the field, runs it right down their throat, cashes it in on a 4th down conversion there to the right side for the opening drive score. Sitting there thinking, all right, backup quarterback in the game, down 7. It's raining. How is this going to be a good day for Ole Miss? Backup quarterback goes in, Austin Simmons. That's a name you need to remember. That's a name you need to know for next year because he is going to be legit. Big believer in his potential. He went right down the field, delivered a couple really nice throws in the process. Had a 4th and 2 conversion, at a 3rd and 10 conversion, and fit it into some pretty tight windows against a really good defense. He gets down the field, they score a touchdown, and you feel like, wow, didn't see that coming. And then Jackson Dart and company, he goes back in the ball game. They're able to go and scrape 9 more points out of the first half. Thought they did a really good job in protection, right? The one question that we had for Ole Miss going into the game, would they be able to block them? And having seen that group from Georgia and what they did to the Texas Longhorns just a couple weeks earlier, I was concerned. I was really concerned for Ole Miss's offensive line, but Jackson Dart got rid of the ball really quickly. They were hitting receivers on crossing routes. They had a lot of things that Georgia was having to account for. So Lane Kiffin and his offensive staff, they deserve tons of credit for how they schemed up this Georgia team. And then finally, in the second half, that's when their defense really started to settle in. The pass rush was relentless. Georgia's got some issues along the offensive line. They are not the same team as they were earlier in the season along the offensive line. Their left tackle struggling. Their right guard was struggling. Both got replaced at some point or another, where Monroe Freeling, their backup tackle, went in a couple times at a few different places. So they're trying to figure out who were going to be the best 5 yesterday, and it just didn't matter. Princely Uman-Mielen, transfer from Florida off the left, was relentless, had so many big plays in the game. Suntaran Perkins, also a big day for him as well. So this pass rush for Ole Miss, tremendous. And Ole Miss keeps their playoff hopes alive, guys. And I'm telling you this already. I've told this to other people. That is not a team you want to see in the playoffs. Now, they can very easily lose a game that they shouldn't. We've seen that already to Kentucky and to LSU. But this team is 2 fourth down stops away from being undefeated, and they gotten a fourth down stop on 4th and 7, backed up in their own end against Kentucky, they win that game. And then against LSU, if they could have just tackled Nussmeier on a 4th down, they would have been in a great spot to win that game as well. This team is extremely dangerous, and we found that out yesterday. And not just because of their offense and the high-powered nature of their offense. They just beat the number 3 team in the country, one of the biggest wins in school history, without arguably their best player in Trey Harris at wide receiver. They're going to be really good down the stretch. They just have to handle the success, because the maturity and the thin air that they're now experiencing and the press clippings that they could likely read, that could be effective. And they go to Florida in a couple weeks. And Florida, I think, is a pretty dangerous team, especially if Florida gets DJ Lagway back. Of course, without him, they are not the same, as proven by the performance on the road at Texas this past weekend. Texas, probably the best passing day of the season for Texas. I'm not sure you could argue against it. Quinn Ewers looked comfortable. The protection looked great. I thought there was a chance that this Florida defensive line could create some problems for an offensive line that has at times had some struggles. They didn't. They held up perfectly throughout the course of the game. Texas found a lot of plays downfield. They still hit the catch and run stuff. They still hit the screens. They still hit the underneath stuff. But it did look like there was a real emphasis this week to take some chances downfield, and it was a welcome sight. I don't feel like Texas has been aggressive enough this year in the passing attack. I'd hoped that that was going to be something that they would use down the stretch, and they did so beautifully in this game. Florida didn't have a chance. I mean, Florida's offense, while Jackson got his on the ground on occasion, the backs got a couple good looks and a couple good opportunities. But let's be real, man. They didn't have a chance with Aiden Warner at quarterback. Like with Lagway, they have a chance against anybody. But with Warner, with all due respect, they're just not going to be able to beat teams of this caliber. So they're going to need Lagway back in a big way, because it doesn't get any easier. LSU comes to them, they'll be ticked off. And then Ole Miss comes to them the second to last week of the season. So a lot of meat on the bone for Florida, but Texas proved what they're capable of with that performance over the Florida Gators. Moving next to another game that was in the noon window, that was at Georgia Tech. Miami, they finally got, right? Miami's been playing with fire now for a little bit, and it's like, hey, Cam, go play hero ball. When things get a little cloudy, when things get murky and challenging, Cam, go be a hero. Let's go get it taken care of. Well, this Georgia Tech defense, and we had told you, I believe I told you last week, they were not a team that was a really scary pass rushing unit. If anything, they were very human in their pursuit of the passer. Well, I would say in this particular game, they were super disruptive. They held Miami to 3 of 10 on 3rd down. They held Miami to 1 for 4 on 4th down, and that was the key. Yes, they got the turnover late when Cam Ward got blitzed up the middle and was flailing the ball around. He gets strip sacked. But if you look at it, man, there was a lot more there to like from Georgia Tech's defense. I didn't think they'd be able to cover them. I didn't think they'd be able to get them in a situation where Miami was on the defensive. I thought there was a real good chance that Miami could score 50 in this one. And boy, did we get this one wrong, because I just did not anticipate this type of defensive performance from the Yellow Jackets. They had strengthened against the run this season, but the passing attack as a result of that strengthening had suffered dramatically. Well, that wasn't the case this past weekend. They didn't allow a ton of big plays. They didn't allow a lot of catch and run situations, and they did not give Cam Ward the amount of time that they would normally give to their quarterback. So, tremendous job by the entire Georgia Tech staff. Haynes King was back, but did he make a difference? Absolutely he did. But it wasn't like it was a track meet because of Haynes King being put back into the lineup. Yes, he ran the ball with great effectiveness. There were a few plays that he made with his legs that were tremendous. Thought he played a smart and clean football game, but the defense was what won this one for the Yellow Jackets. So a tremendous, tremendous performance from them in a game that was not overly shocking, but the way it went was a little bit more shocking because the defense is what won it. Let's go next to Penn State. Got this one totally wrong. I thought Washington would be able to kind of neutralize this Penn State offense, so it would be a lower scoring game, and a game that I think maybe 17 10, 17-7 type of affair. That wasn't the case. Penn State, right out of the gate, 28 points unanswered scored there in the first half of this football game. It was great to see the passing attack take off with someone other than Tyler Warren, right? Trey Wallace, 5 for 84. Seeing how they were kind of distributing the football, giving them opportunities on the perimeter, that was big time. Look, we know that Tyler Warren's going to get his. 8 for 75 again. He's always going to get his. But we need the other guys around him to step up. So Trey Wallace being able to do that. Liam Clifford had a 20-yard completion. Julian Fleming had a couple catches as well and a touchdown. I think this is going to be something that we continue to watch with this Penn State team. I've never been concerned about their rushing attack. I've never been concerned about their ability to find opportunities through the air to Tyler Warren. And I've never been concerned about them being able to play great defense. Those three things I always expect. But what I am a little concerned about was the personnel on the perimeter. They showed in this game that they can, if need be, step up if they absolutely got to have it. We'll go next to Tennessee. Tennessee's the 7th-ranked team in the country. It was fine, right? It was a fine performance. The one concern out of this one is Nico Iamaleava got hurt. Upper body injury, was out. They had to put in the backup. He went the rest of the way. Dylan Sampson, as a result, 30 carries in the performance. This guy is just a complete workhorse. So 30 carries, is that a performance that you want to replicate week in and week out? Probably not. But with your starting quarterback sidelined, it probably makes some sense to lean on your most experienced and most talented player. That's your running back. Thought the running game was solid. Would like maybe there to have been a few more big plays in the run game created. But then again, with Tennessee giving off the impression they're the tiniest bit one-dimensional in the absence of Nico, it made sense that it was kind of a churn and burn type of game. I also was encouraged by some of the big plays that were created through the passing attack. Remember, there was a time for Nico where he was not accurate on the downfield throws. All right, was missing throws that really weren't overly challenging, but he wasn't missing by much. Now, saw it, granted, didn't play a full game, hit a couple downfield throws. One to Squirrel White on a touchdown is a great catch by Squirrel White, by the way. And then two on an underthrown deep ball to the right-hand side. I prefer the underthrows. I can live with the underthrows. Thornton ends up going up, catching it, taking off for the score, but it was the overthrows that were killing Tennessee. Underthrows, at least they have a chance. You get a defensive pass interference. You got a chance for your receiver to go up and make a catch. You got a chance to go and at least fight for the ball. On the overthrows, nobody's going to get it. So I was encouraged that they have now made that adjustment with Nico and how he's releasing the football, because now the balls are far more catchable. But we will be watching his prognosis closely this week. Will he be able to go this weekend when they go on the road? And what might be a gotta-have-it situation for Georgia, who will host Tennessee in what's likely a playoff situation game for both. Michigan and Indiana. This is a game that was on opposite us, and all I could kind of see were the scores. So I did not get to watch the tape on this game just yet. I will watch it today, and we'll get back to you with some of the takeaways tomorrow on our Monday edition of Always College Football, but it felt like Indiana was kind of in cruise control. It felt like they were in a really good spot. They're up 17-3 at halftime, and then they couldn't manufacture much down the stretch whatsoever. Michigan has a couple nice adjustments in the run game. Michigan, I thought, had a pretty decent game defensively. No one had really played Indiana better than Michigan this year. Indiana, granted, has not seen a caliber of player like they saw yesterday in Michigan on the defense. But there was some things that I saw yesterday based on, like I said, a few takeaways here and there that had me feeling just the tiniest bit more concerned about Indiana. I think their inexperience in the big game, their inexperience in the slugfest showed just a little bit yesterday. But I'm not going to get to the point where they're now all the way out of the playoffs. Like, I'm not moving them all the way up. I'm not moving them down based on this performance. This is a solid win. Now you get the chance to go on the road and take on the Buckeyes there in Columbus. But I think it might have exposed a flaw or two that I wasn't sure was there. There were a couple nice contested catches on the perimeter that were solid. They've been doing that all year, but the level of execution was not quite as crisp as we've come to expect this season. Either way, they get the win. Either way, you feel good about it. I also am curious. It felt like there was times. I don't want Davis Warren for Michigan, by the way, dropping back 32 times in the game. I don't care what the circumstances are. There's no reason why his attempts should ever eclipse 20, ever. I would just run it. And while they did that at times, they didn't do it with enough regularity for me to feel good about Michigan being that tilted towards the pass. We'll go next to BYU, Utah. This was a phenomenal game, by the way. I loved this game. It was late, so I was a little dreary-eyed there at the end of the game, but highly entertaining. Utah storms out. That second quarter was vintage Utah. I have not seen their offense play like that in a really long time. Now, I am not unaccustomed to seeing their defense pitch shutouts. I mean, we know their defense can play. We've seen that forever. That is not uncommon. The only points BYU really was able to manufacture in a big way was on a kick return there in the first half. So there wasn't a whole lot there for BYU early on, but they made some adjustments. I thought Retzlaff settled in there in the second half. I thought the running game got going just a little bit there in the second half. Martin, they found a couple opportunities to feed him. And this group really willed their way to victory. Now, they forced 3 turnovers in the process. Without that -3 turnover margin, to be -3 in the turnover margin and lose the game by 1 is pretty remarkable, I might add. But this was an interesting game. I thought Rose provided a bit of a spark to Utah's offense at quarterback. There were some good things, and there were some things that were, you could tell he was kind of an inexperienced player. But Mekhi Bernard ran as hard as he ever has. I mean, the guy is just a phenomenal back and continues to play at a ridiculously high level. BYU, man, this was a difficult game. I told you I thought BYU'd win. I told you I thought should take the points because I thought this game could come down. I said this thing could come down to a field goal at the buzzer. People were like, we don't say that in football. It's at the buzzer. Well, football guys say at the buzzer sometimes. Football guys also say shot clock and things like that. And people are like, what is that? I understand. So I apologize for the football terminology, but I said BYU would win this thing at the buzzer with the field goal. They did. And I think that this was a tremendous resiliency game. It would have been really easy, I think, for BYU. This is Utah's Super Bowl this year. This is the last thing that could salvage their season. It was to spoil an undefeated BYU run. This was the one. This is the one they had circled. They pulled out all the stops, and they left it all on the field. And BYU weathered the storm, absorbed the punches, and then started to punch back there in the second half. They should feel great about getting that win because that was not an easy win to come by. Speaking of easy wins, Notre Dame had one yesterday against Florida State. My goodness. Notre Dame, another 50-point performance. How much of that has to do with Florida State? How much of that has to do with Notre Dame? I think it's probably a little of both. Either way, Riley Leonard continues to look more and more comfortable. The passing attack, not outrageously efficient in this performance, but the rushing attack, there was a lot to like about that. Anytime you have backs that are averaging over 10 yards a carry like Jadarian Price did, nearly 14 yards a carry, 7 for 95, but did have that long run, that 65-yarder. This is what I want Notre Dame's offense to evolve into. One which you have 3 guys that are all flirting with double-digit carries, Riley Leonard, Jadarian Price, and Jeremiah Love. I think Anais Williams is going to continue to get more here at some point for Notre Dame as well. If they needed to get into the 15-carry range for all 3 of those guys, they could do it, but they were pulling them out. I mean, they didn't need to keep them in the ball game any longer than they had to. It was just wasted reps at that point. So a resounding and convincing victory as Florida State now falls to 1-9. My goodness, what a mess there in Tallahassee. Big one in the nightcap, Alabama and LSU. This was a vintage Alabama performance. And if not for the late touchdown that Garrett Nussmeier threw to Kyron Lacey in the back left corner of the end zone, this was as good a defensive performance as I've seen from Alabama in quite some time. Now, people have long said, oh, this ain't the Saban teams. This ain't this ain't that. I don't recall the last time a Nick Saban coach team went to Baton Rouge and completely shut them down. Now, I remember one time in COVID, little different animal. That year is kind of a weird year, by the way. This was a completely dominant performance by Alabama. Now, 2018, I believe they pitched a shutout. They almost did so again as far as touchdowns are concerned. All Garrett Nussmeier and company could do would manufacture field goals there in the first half. First drive of the second half looks like they're going to get into it again. And Deontay Lawson picks it off at the goal line with a great play, just an instinctive play to get out underneath that throw, jump and time his jump perfectly, and pull it in. This was a tremendous performance on both sides of the ball from Alabama. The quarterback run game, and we had talked about it, this is all about whether or not LSU can stop the quarterback run game. I told you the numbers from Jalen Milroe last year. Told you that he went last year with, if you exclude sacks, he went for 167 and 4 touchdowns. Told you this is the biggest problem for LSU and has been all season. They were giving up 6.5 yards a carry to quarterbacks on designed runs. Told you they were giving up 350 yards rushing on designed runs to quarterbacks. Told you this was a huge problem. And Alabama has the best running quarterback in the country right now with the speed that Jalen Milroe showcased yesterday. He goes for 12 carries, 185, had a 72-yard run that put this thing on ice. But there were multiple third down carries where they just called a pretty simple run scheme. They schemed it up nicely, but it wasn't like it was this crazy exotic run scheme that no one's ever seen before. They just were consistently able to find numbers in the run game and to run into favorable looks. They attacked the edges, and LSU had no chance. I have a lot of respect for LSU's coaching staff. I think that's a good staff. I love Blake Baker. I think Joe Sloan's a good coach, and I think Brian Kelly's a top 5 coach in America. But Alabama's coaching staff takes a backseat to almost nobody. I don't know if they're the best. I don't know where they rank in the top 5. I'm not so sure how you would rank them all out. But Kalen DeBoer, with an extra week of work, good luck. Because he's going to have a scheme that is going to be very difficult to defend. And we've seen this now. We saw it against Georgia, where they came out of the gates like gangbusters there in the first half of that football game. Looked incredible. That was off an extra week of work. This week in particular, extra week of work, they looked the best they've looked all season on both lines of scrimmage. Then you think about the first game of the year, and while that was against Western Kentucky's rattled off, I think, like 7 wins in a row now. They're like 7-2. So Western Kentucky's not a terrible football team, but with an extra time for Kalen DeBoer to scheme you up, he's going to scheme you up, man. But I think the game ball might need to go to Kane Womack in this one. The defensive coordinator. He's been embattled a little bit, and he has not been dealt the hand that most people think he was dealt. Their talent level is good. I would argue that their talent level might even be great, but it is not elite like we've seen from Alabama in the past. And this was a beautifully called defensive game plan. They brought tons of pressure. We had said LSU's offensive line is arguably the strength on the left side, but you got to attack it right up the middle. Alabama did time and time and time again. It was really impressive to see how aggressive they got, because we had not seen Alabama bringing a lot of pressure. We had not seen Alabama calling a lot of blitzes. This was new. This was different. And now this might be the type of team moving forward that's willing and capable of rolling the dice, bringing heat, and applying pressure to the opposing quarterback. They flustered Garrett Nussmeier. They constantly had him on the move. They hit him multiple times. His jersey was a mess at the end of the game. And this defensive line answered the challenge. And these linebackers played off the charts good as well. Want to also give a shout out to the secondary, man. They played great. That's a really good receiving core. And I thought the coverage was sound, but the coverage was definitely simplified because of how good and relentless the pass rush plan was. Boise State, bit of a nail biter. They're the 12th ranked team in the country. Genty goes for over 200 finally. The last couple of games hadn't been his usual self as far as numbers were concerned. He gets back on track, but Nevada 3-8, taking Boise to the wire, not super comfortable. Either way, Boise wins, Nevada covers. And I thought, look, you're going to have a game or two where you just don't click. You're not playing great. The other team finds some things. And that's what happened in this game. I don't have any negative takeaways from Boise. I just think Boise has a great running back and a bunch of other solid football players. There's going to be weeks where they don't have their best stuff. This was one of those. They still get a win. Iowa State, their dreams of a Big 12 title on life support right now. They go to Kansas and lose. We told you Kansas was a giant killer. This is why. Everyone has looked at Kansas's record. They're 3-6, and it hasn't been an ideal season for Lance Leipold and company, but it's in there. It's always been in there. So I look at this team and look at how many close games they've lost. There's been a bunch. They've played, I thought, a really solid football game offensively, but defensively, there's quite a bit to clean up. Rocco Beck goes for nearly 400 in the performance as they climb their way back in the ball game, because this thing looked like it was game, set, match there at halftime. They were up 31-13, and then Iowa State storms back, makes it a little bit more interesting, but Kansas has just enough offense in the second half to be able to continue their surge towards pulling off the upset. So Iowa State probably going to fall out of the top 25 at this point. Maybe they fall down to 23, 24, but either way, it further solidifies my opinion that the Big 12 will only be getting one team in the college football playoff. That team might be Colorado. We'll explain why here in just a minute. Virginia knocks off Pitt. Colorado. Thought this was a good matchup for Colorado. I know going on the road is always difficult to Lubbock, always a challenge. But Colorado, this was a good matchup because when you look at Texas Tech and what they have in the back end, it's just not great. It's not great at all. So I thought that Colorado would be able to move the ball through the air. They did. Shedeur Sanders, 30 of 43 for 291 and 3 touchdowns. And the matchup just on the perimeter was big. Shiloh Sanders also finds pay dirt as well on the little fumble kind of weird play there at the end. He goes in and does his dad's dance. Pretty cool stuff there. Colorado really in control of their own destiny right now, it seems like, to get to the college football playoff. Washington State stays undefeated. They beat Utah State. Virginia Tech, they really played great in the first half, but Clemson with 24 second half points pulls off a nice comeback, a really solid comeback. And Cade Klubnik, not his best day by any stretch of the imagination. They were able to hit enough big plays down the field. The defense stepped up, had a turnover there in the second half. They were in a really good spot there as things kind of came to a close. And then finally, Army, they knock off North Texas in what was one of the most unwatchable games offensively of the season, 14-3. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Like, rate, and subscribe. Check back with us tomorrow. We're going to dive into the tape right now. We're about to go lock in, learn a lot more about what went down this past weekend. So check back with us tomorrow for our 10 takeaways from Week 11 of Always College Football. For all of us here at ACF, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, I'm Greg. We hope you have an awesome day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.